Media Institute, the foremost independent advocate for the First Amendment for over 4 decades, is one of the nation's leading nonpartisan organizations focused on media and communications policy. The Media Institute promotes freedom of speech, recognizes excellence in journalism, and encourages a competitive media environment and communications industry. Considering the current state of affairs in the nation's capital and across the country, our mission is more relevant than ever. Thanks to our sponsors and supporters. At the platinum level, AT&T, Charter Communications, Consumer Technology Association, iHeartMedia, LG Electronics USA, Tegna, Verizon Communications, and Viacom CBS. Our gold sponsors include America's public television stations, CTIA, Everything Wireless, Education Networks of America, Interactive Advertising Bureau, National Association of Broadcasters, Comcast NBC Universal, and NCTA, the Internet and Television Association. Silver sponsors include ACA Connects, America's Communications Association, the Advanced Television Systems Committee, ATSC, Cooley LLP, Corporation for Public Broadcasting, Covington and Burling LLP, Cox Enterprises Inc., Davis Wright Tremaine LLP, DLA Piper, Fox Corporation, Lorman Center PLLC, News Media Alliance, T-Mobile, U.S. Telecom, Wiley, and Wilkinson Barker Nauer LLP. Thanks to all for making today's event possible. And now the President and CEO of the Media Institute, Rick Kapler.
Hey, good afternoon and welcome to our September Communications Forum virtual luncheon. It's great to have you with us today. I'd like to start by acknowledging our luncheon sponsors who make this series possible. We couldn't do this without you, so thank you. Let me tell you about 2 events coming up this fall. Our next virtual luncheon will take place on November 9th. At that time, we'll welcome Patrick Butler, President and CEO of America's Public Television Stations. That's the membership organization that works to ensure a strong and financially sound public television system. We look forward to Pat's insights on the outlook for public television, and that date again is November 9th. And in October, as I hope you already know, we'll be hosting our annual Free Speech America Gala. It will be in virtual format once again, and the date will be Wednesday, October 20th. We'll present our American Horizon Award to William Kennard, a former FCC chairman and currently chairman of the board of AT&T. We'll present our Freedom of Speech Award to Nora O'Donnell, anchor and managing editor of the CBS Evening News. Randall Stevenson, the former chairman of AT&T, and Gail King, the co-host of CBS Mornings, will help us make those presentations. And we'll be giving a special Lifetime Achievement Award to Senator Gordon Smith, the president and CEO of the National Association of Broadcasters. I'm happy to say that Senator Smith will be our featured speaker. Now, the Free Speech America Gala is our principal fundraising event, and we definitely need your support. We've put together a great package of benefits for our sponsors, including a gourmet dinner from Ridgewell's Caterers, delivered to your home with wine and flowers on the evening of October 20th. You can learn more about our gala and sign up as a sponsor by going to our website, mediainstitute.org. We need your support, so please plan to join us. Right now, it's my pleasure to introduce today's program. We're going to have a fireside chat hosted by our own Dick Wiley. As you know, Dick is a former FCC chairman and is the Media Institute's chairman of the board. We're grateful to Dick for serving as our host today. Our guest is Kathleen Ham, who is the Senior Vice President of Government Affairs for T-Mobile US here in Washington. Kathleen and her team regularly engage Congress, the FCC, state agencies, and other governmental bodies on a wide range of regulatory and policy issues, including spectrum, consumer, public safety, and competition matters. Most recently, Kathleen oversaw the 2-year advocacy campaign and regulatory engagement at all levels of government that led to the successful completion of T-Mobile's merger with Sprint in April 2020. Prior to joining T-Mobile, Kathleen worked for 14 years at the FCC in several top policy positions, including Deputy Chief of the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau. She was the first chief of the FCC's Spectrum Auctions Program, where she was responsible for early landmark PCS spectrum auctions. Kathleen received her law degree from Catholic University's Columbus School of Law and her undergraduate degree in journalism from the University of Colorado. She has received numerous industry honors and most recently was named one of Cablefax's 2020 Most Powerful Women in Broadband and Media. Remember that during our fireside chat, you'll have a chance to submit your questions by using the Ask a Question feature on your screen. After their conversation, Dick will have a lively Q&A session with Kathleen based on your questions. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to introduce our chairman of the board, Mr. Dick Wiley, and our distinguished guest, Ms. Kathleen Ham.
Thank you, Rick. And thanks also, of course, to Kathleen for engaging in this fireside chat. I'd like to begin with some questions about 5G in rural America. As you know, Kathleen, Congress, various administrations, and the FCC all have long touted bringing advanced broadband to rural communities as one of their most important goals. But why has this proved to be such a challenge?
Thank you, Dick. And I also want to thank Rick and the Media Institute for inviting me to speak today and to have this wonderful conversation with you, Dick. Rural coverage has always been a bit of a challenge. And I think that, T-Mobile has traditionally been an urban carrier providing service primarily in urban areas. But we had the opportunity with the 600 megahertz spectrum auction that occurred a few years ago. We were one of the top bidders in that auction, the top bidder, I believe. Spent $8 billion, and we're able to get 600 megahertz spectrum, which helps us with that coverage. So the rural challenge has always been that, it takes a lot of cell sites with certain types of spectrum to cover it. But with low band spectrum, you need fewer cell sites, and it makes it much more cost effective. So we've really, at T-Mobile, we're leaning into rural coverage these days, and we have some exciting things that we're doing in that space.
Kathleen, when do you think that such rural areas are going to really see the benefits promised by this new generation of wireless?
Well, they're already seeing it. I mean, with our 600 megahertz launch now, I think we cover 305 million pops. So nearly everybody in the country has the benefit of our 600 megahertz spectrum. And we're taking that forward in other ways. We're opening new retail stores. We have an obligation under our merger commitments to do more in the rural area. And that does include opening more retail stores in rural America. That includes, more deployment in rural America. We just announced this hometown grants where we're actually granting, we're going to spend $25 million over the next 5 years, with a lot of small towns around the country, offering sort of community grants. And our first award just went to Woodstock, Illinois, I believe. And the other thing that we're doing is a little different. We're hiring hometown experts. So in some towns, it's you're too small to have a retail store, but we're hiring individuals who are going to make themselves available in these smaller towns, to help people sign up for our service. So we're doing some different things, and I think we're having some success at it already. So we're already seeing some of the benefits of that. And I will also say that with the merger, we were able to acquire 2.5 spectrum. So you have that nice layer of low band 600 megahertz spectrum that gives us the coverage benefits. And then you layer on top of that this midband 2.5, which gives us the added capacity. And we're launching that spectrum. We're at about 165 million people today that we hit with that 2.5 ultra capacity spectrum. So our our company's always been a big proponent of what we call the layer cake strategy of spectrum, which is to have that low band, mid band, and then high band for certain types of settings. But getting that base coverage layer out of 600 is really what has enabled us to take off and provide service in these rural areas.
Are there steps that government, Congress, the FCC, states, and local authorities could do to assist wireless providers like T-Mobile to get 5G out to rural areas even faster?
Yeah, well, spectrum is always a good thing, and we do, as I said, have some of the 2.5 spectrum, but there's a lot of vacant 2.5 spectrum out there for the commission to auction, and most of it is in rural areas, rural and small towns. And so we'd like to see that auction underway. It's been about 2 years since the rules were adopted, and the auction rules have been proposed. It's really time for that spectrum to come to auction, and so we'd like to see that sooner rather than later.
Well, of course, that 2.5 gigahertz spectrum was, I think, a major driver of T-Mobile's and Sprint's merger.
Yes.
Can you speak to what the 2.5 portfolio means for the company's 5G plans?
Well, it does. It, like I said, it enables us to have that high-speed capacity. And one of the things that has been terrific that it's allowed us to do is to move into what we call in-home broadband capability. So in areas where the mobile network has that added capacity, we're able to offer, on top of our mobile service, an in-home broadband offering. And we're finding, particularly in rural areas and smaller towns where there isn't a lot of competition or a lot of capability for broadband, there's a real hunger for this. So our plans are to deploy somewhere between 7 and 8 million customers, hopefully, by 2025. But of course, we'd love to do more than that. So the 2.5 spectrum is really what enables us to offer that service. And that's been very exciting because it also, we're having speeds on average of 100 megabits per second download, way in excess of what the commission describes as broadband, which is 25.3, right? So, it really has a lot of potential to offer competition, greater competition to cable, even beyond mobile. So we're very excited about it.
A member of the audience just asked when you think the 5G, the 2.5 gigahertz spectrum auction might start.
Well, we would like it to start soon after the 3.45 auction, which is starting in October, I believe. And, so I think we'd love to see it in the first or second quarter of 2022. The sooner the better. That spectrum, and I'm sure, Dick, you recall, that spectrum has a long, long history, going back maybe 25 years with the FCC. You were probably chair at the time.
Not that far.
It's spectrum that has languished for various reasons, and it's been on a licensing freeze for some time. And so it's time for that remaining spectrum to be auctioned. And we're not alone in this, by the way. CCA, that represents a lot of the smaller rural carriers, they're a big proponent of seeing that auction happen. And the other interesting thing is, I think a lot of the tribal organizations who have some access to that spectrum, there's some great opportunities to maybe marry up what we're doing with 2.5 with some of those organizations, and some real excellent potential, I think, to really use that spectrum for the better.
Good. And Kathleen, for years, the wireless industry could only talk about the great things brought about by mobility. But guess what? Now everyone is keen on good old fixed wireless. What's going on here?
Well, that's the in-home broadband capability that I was describing. I think, we are able to use that 2.5 spectrum to make that offer. And like I said, I think we're very excited about it and the speeds that it brings, and there's the demand for it. So I think, the 2.5 spectrum is really key for us to launching that and continuing to launch that in-home broadband capability.
Under the leadership of your former CEO, T-Mobile always promoted itself as the Uncarrier. That is an upstart in the telecom industry, offering a number of new competitive initiatives. But now you've got more wireless spectrum than any other company. So how does T-Mobile see itself at this point?
Well, we're still the Uncarrier. I mean, the Uncarrier is in our DNA. It's what's made the company so successful. Our employees thrive on that. What the Uncarrier means is basically we're not like the other guys. Okay, we're different, and I think the promises that we have made as part of the merger are coming to fruition. And some of the things that we promised, for example, and we have some wonderful offerings that we've put forward, Project 10 Million, which we launched last September. This is a $10 billion multi-year commitment to students to close the digital divide. And this is something we're partnering with school districts across the country, offering free wireless hotspots, free high-speed data, and access to laptops, tablets at no cost. And this has just been a tremendously successful program. And this is something that, a commitment that we made as part of the merger. We're also have this Connected Heroes program where we've launched a 10-year commitment to provide free service and 5G access to first responders at the state and local level. And finally, we've also launched as part of our commitment the lowest price smartphone plan out there, which is $15 a month, and for service. So we're doing some stuff that is making, and I'll also say we recently launched Magenta Max, which is basically the first service where we're not holding back. People can use it to the max, if you will. We're not slowing your speeds. And this is something that triggered a response from AT&T to offer something similar. And so that's sort of what the Uncarrier is about. It's about leaning into our commitment to our customers and really kind of forcing the competition to do more. And we are absolutely continuing to do that. And I think the merger itself has triggered a deep response from the competition, from AT&T and Verizon. I mean, you see just what they did in the C-band auction with their the spectrum that they bid for. Clearly, they're feeling the heat. They're feeling the competition from T-Mobile. And that's a big part of what the Uncarrier is about. It's about forcing the competitors to do more. And we love it. We're going to continue to do it.
Kathleen, you mentioned auction bans. Should the FCC be holding even more auctions for spectrum?
Yeah, absolutely. And I started at the commission running the spectrum auctions program, and I have a deep affinity for spectrum auctions. I think it's a great way to get the spectrum out there, and the commission has been tremendously successful over the years in doing it. Again, we have an auction right now that I can't speak to that is going because we're in the quiet period, but I do want to see more auctions, 2.5. As I've said, I'd like to see that sooner rather than later. That's an important auction. move forward. And I think T-Mobile and a lot of the smaller carriers would like to see that done. And then I think, there's other spectrum on the horizon. Congress is talking about possibly allocating additional spectrum. And there may be, I hear something possibly in the budget reconciliation bill along those lines. And, spectrum raises a lot of money for the U.S. Treasury. It's very valuable. And so I expect we'll see more of it.
Well, speaking of spectrum, what do you think the FCC should do about AT&T's request for a midband spectrum screen?
Yes. Well, the one thing about that screen tells me, boy, what an about face. For AT&T now to be endorsing a screen is really a complete 180. They fought very hard and very mightily against the low band screen and the low band reserve that T-Mobile advocated for. And so what this tells me is competition is indeed working. They're feeling the heat. They're realizing that T-Mobile is the leader in 5G right now, and we're pushing them. And so they're trying to use the regulatory process to help them out, to basically protect them from competition. What the screen is about is supposed to be pro-competitive, not anti-competitive. So what AT&T is trying to do is use it to protect themselves from competition. That's not what the screen should be about. So I'm sure we'll have an opportunity to speak to this more fully at some point in the future. But let's just put it at that their proposal is flawed in many ways and is not something that certainly T-Mobile is going to support.
Do you think the Commission needs to take additional steps to ensure that licensees are deploying the spectrum that they have in a reasonable period of time?
Yeah, I mean, T-Mobile doesn't sit on a megahertz, we build it out. And we very rapidly built out that 600 megahertz spectrum. It's really also what enabled the broadcasters to transition off of that spectrum. That spectrum was originally, broadcast spectrum. And T-Mobile's active build out and participation in building out that spectrum is really what helped make that transition a success. So we're all for build out. We're all for making use of the spectrum. We think that the Commission needs to perhaps even be even more aggressive with build out and make sure that people are in fact, fulfilling their obligations.
Such
so
as
they don't waste any
time frames or time limits or what?
Well, the Commission, the one thing about build out that you do have to take into consideration is every band is a little bit different, right? Some of it's occupied, like the broadcast spectrum was occupied. A lot of federal bands are occupied. We had to clear the AWS spectrum years ago, and that was another one where T-Mobile took the lead in really clearing the federal agencies from that band. So I think the original plan there was for a 7-year transition. And my recollection is we did it in 2 because we really needed that spectrum for, at the time, 3G. So we moved very aggressively at that time because we had to get to 3G and work with the agencies to transition even earlier than they had originally planned. But you do have to consider that, every band's a little bit different in terms of timeframes. And there really is there's no free and clear spectrum pretty much anymore, right? It's all occupied. So it's about transitioning to new services. And you have to enable that with the right timeframes and inputs in terms of what it's being used for.
Kathleen, how do you feel about the bipartisan infrastructure bill now pending in Congress? And do you think it ultimately is going to be enacted?
Well, I think they're very positive signals about it being enacted. I think we're very interested in the fact that there's a very strong commitment to affordability and the low cost alternatives there. very active participants in the current emergency broadband benefit program, which I think is really continued as part of that legislation, as I understand it. So we think that's a very positive development. We also think it's a very positive development that Congress was open in terms of it being technology neutral, effectively. In other words, it didn't foreclose wireless as a solution for broadband. That's good news for our in-home broadband products, and I know Verizon is similarly deploying an in-home broadband wireless product. So you can't solve the problems of broadband with a one-size-fits-all type of solution. I think there may be different, depending on the location, the terrain, et cetera. You have to be open to, I think, different technologies and solutions. And so I think that was a really positive development in that legislation.
Kathleen, Hurricane Ida is just the most recent challenge for our country and indeed for the telecom industry. How did you guys, T-Mobile, fare in that unfortunate situation?
Yeah, and these hurricanes are very unfortunate, but I will say that it's amazing to me because I'm on all the internal distributions on this, and it's amazing effort that industry puts forward to really keep the networks up and running, reaching out to our customers, the collaboration across government and industry. I see it firsthand. And so a lot of that's happening without regulation. That's just happening because, we're not interested in our networks being down. We want our networks up and running, and we want to serve our customers. And so I thought with Ida, which was a, terrible storm, a lot of damage done. But I think the industry really did its very best during that terrible event, but we always learn from these things. I think the flexibility that we have to bring in cows and colts and pop up vans and so forth into the areas to try to address some of the network outages and that sort of thing. That sort of flexibility, I think, is really important for industry to continue to have. And I know the FCC is going to take a look at this, take a look at resiliency. But, it's interesting. Years ago, I had the opportunity to actually go see what backup power looks like. And it is a huge battery that consumed, a floor of a building. It was amazing to me, and you can't do that everywhere. And so you have to have multiple types of solutions that you can bring during these events to keep the network up and running and serving our customers.
Of course, the pandemic has been especially a problem for our country, and it has emphasized the importance of staying connected. And as you know, Congress has funded and the FCC has implemented the emergency broadband and emergency connectivity programs. How do you think those are working? And would you like to see them perhaps be made permanent?
Yeah, well, I think that some wise things were done with those programs. I think to maybe cut some of the red tape that constrains some of those programs from being successful. So I think they took some lessons learned from the Lifeline program, for example, to make some modifications that I think streamlined some of the regulation for EBB. And and also learn from E-rate for the ECF program. I think things that needed to be sort of streamlined, and so I think it's an important program. I think it it too is in the infrastructure bill, I believe, and hopefully will remain there. And if that passes, and it's likely to pass soon, I understand, I think continuation of that program is a great opportunity, and I think is important for consumers. So to have those opportunities. So more to come on that, but we've been actively participating in that program, and I believe we'll continue to do so.
Very good. Kathleen, let me turn to some audience questions. Here's one. What initiatives do you have for partnering with small, disadvantaged, and women-owned businesses in your rollout and deployment?
Good question. So one thing I will say that I also came out of the merger was we entered into a memorandum of understanding with a group of civil rights organizations led by the National Urban League, among others. And that has resulted in our forming an external diversity and inclusion council that we meet with on a regular basis. These are organizations who are very passionate about that very issue, about being able to partner, with small and minority-owned businesses. And so there's more of that to come, where we have certain commitments under the merger that we're going to do more in that space, and I think we continue to do more, including increasing the diversity of our board. T-Mobile has recently announced some new positions to our board that has now resulted in half of our board being, women or people of color. We've also made some new diverse appointments to our C-suite. And so we absolutely want the management of the company to reflect, who our customers are and who our employees are. And we want to also lean into, more opportunities in the minority and small business space. So more to come on that.
Another question from the audience. After the bands that we've already talked about, which do you see as the most promising frequencies for auction in the future?
Well, good question. I think a lot of it is, 3.45 and 2.5 obviously are on the radar screen. I think the spectrum adjacent to 3.45 is also on the radar screen. And then I think, other bands to be determined, really, because a lot of them are probably bands that the federal government is utilizing. And, I think that will be a subject of future evaluation. But the one thing that seems to be happening is, we keep, technology keeps improving. We keep making better use of the spectrum and able to use spectrum at higher frequencies than we never would have imagined before. I know the 6 gigahertz band is another one that, has been talked about. So more to come on that.
All right, Kathleen, a year and a half has passed, if you can believe it, as you can, since you had your merger with Sprint. How's life changed for your organization, your own regulatory team? And what new issues are you facing?
Yeah, well, thank you for that, Dick. Well, I have a larger team, and that's great. I do think it's been challenging, though, because literally the merger closed and the pandemic started. So I haven't been able to actually bring my team together in person since the pandemic started and the merger closed, which is unfortunate. We've had some great webcasts, and we do get together, online on a regular basis, but that's been a challenge. And but I'm very proud of the team despite all that. I think we've been very focused on the things that matter for the company and for consumers. I think moving forward on our build out of our 5G network. I think all the good work that's being done around the various commitments that we made for the merger. I think, we're keeping incredibly busy on both the FCC front, Congress, also in the states. The attorney generals are very focused on our world, and so we keep very busy. And the team is doing great even under these circumstances. And I look forward to, hopefully not in the too distant future, we put this pandemic behind us, and my team can gather in person. And I will say that T-Mobile just recently announced, as some other companies have, that we're going to a vaccination requirement for employees to be able to badge into T-Mobile facilities. As you know, our headquarters is out in Bellevue, Washington. And so that kicks in by October 25th. I think that the hope of that from our CEO is that it's going to enable people to kind of get back to work in person and feel comfortable doing so.
Another question. Broadcasters claim that their next-gen ATSC 3.0 technology can handle data services, probably or possibly competitively with 5G. What do you say to that?
I go for it. I'm not as familiar with that technology as I am with 5G, but so let them go for it. I don't know. I'm very excited about what 5G can bring. So I think that puts a challenge to them. So it's not just going to be about speeds. It's about other capabilities like the in-home broadband, some of the very exciting applications in the IoT space and other areas that I think, 5G is going to really transform things. So very excited about what it can bring for the business and consumers.
Broadcasters are developing collaborative projects to integrate their 3.0 technology with 5G. What's your response to such ideas? That's the question.
Again, Dick, I don't know. I'm not an engineer, so that's a dangerous question to ask. It's probably something more pointed towards Steve Sharkey on my team, who might be more familiar with that.
Fair enough. Well, Rick, I think we've reached the bewitching point. And Kathleen, I really want to thank you for doing such a wonderful job for us today on this little fireside chat. And let me turn it at this point back to our leader, Rick Kapler.
Hey, thank you, Dick. Thank you, Kathleen, for giving us such a good look at what T-Mobile is doing in terms of spectrum and how that fits in with your 5G plans. Very, very interesting and thorough presentation. Thanks so much for being with us today. And Dick, thank you for bringing your expertise to bear and asking such thoughtful questions. And I think this has been a very fruitful and productive session here to find out more about T-Mobile's plans in the industry in general and where it's all heading and what we might see at the FCC and Congress. So thank you again, Kathleen, for being with us. We really appreciate it. Dick, thank you again.
Thank you both. Thank you.
I want to thank all of our sponsors. Thanks again for being with us and making this series possible. And thanks to Dave Arland and his production team at Arland Communications and John Taylor at LG. And I'd like to remind all of you to remember our Free Speech America Gala on October 20th. And we'll see you back here on November 9th for our Communications Forum virtual luncheon with Pat Butler of ATTs. Thank you for being with us today. Have a great day.
Thank you to our guest speaker today. Thank you to the Navy Band, and a big thank you again to our sponsors. We'll see you next month.